All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Thank you for joining. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Witz with College Confidential. Special shout out to those in California, Texas, New Jersey, and Ohio who responded back to where you're calling in from, and wherever you may be calling from inside the country or out. As I think I saw someone in that normally calls in from London. Want to welcome to our exclusive webinar with HelloCollege, 10 tips for a winning college admission strategy. If you're not familiar with HelloCollege, their mission is to provide genuine personalized college planning guidance that improves acceptance rates, minimizes debt, and matches students with their ideal college and career paths. And they've been able to do that for tens of thousands of families. Before we get going, just one housekeeping item. We do love questions. So as they come up, please just go ahead and post them in the chat, and we'll try to address them either during the presentation. I know Jennifer has a lot to go through, but we certainly would love to address questions as they come up, or we will certainly do so after the presentation. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jennifer Bosco. Dr. Bosco is the Director of Business Development and Sales Operations for HelloCollege. She has extensive experience as a Director of Admissions, an educational leader, and instructor. Jennifer earned her doctorate in international education and a master's degree in educational leadership. And she's been working for over 20 years in higher education to support students and campuses in achieving their goals. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining this evening, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm looking here and love working with College Confidential. Pleased to bring this content, this presentation to you all this evening. I love that there's people all over the United States. I want to do a special shout out to Santa Rosa, California. My daughter lives there. I know it very well. So that makes me feel good having somebody close to my family there. But I know we're all from all over. So thanks for those who shared where they were at. I also shared, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, coming at you tonight. And as Jeff said, I am Dr. Jennifer Bosco with HelloCollege and looking to talk to you about some of the things for you to be thinking about as you start preparing for the college application process. And you'll hear me say it so many times, but it's never the wrong time to get started. The earlier we start with college planning, the better. So before I start jumping in, I'd love to get to know you a little bit more. So thanks for those who shared your location. I'd love to now share, if you could share if you're a parent or student and what grad year you're in. That would be really helpful. I have my children are. I'm a parent, but my children. I have a child in college and one out of. So great. We've got some great parent. We got some parents on the line, 26 and 27s. Excellent. Some students. Excellent. So this is fantastic. So my kid, I have one kid in college and one just graduated. And I'm coming both as a professional, but also as a parent who just went through some of this experience. But that doesn't mean that I know exactly what you all are going through, particularly as sophomores, parents and students in those grades. Before we get started on the top 10, I want to give you a reason about why it is so critical to have a college admissions strategy. When we think about outcomes, when we think about what makes success in college, of course, we want students to graduate. We want students to find a good major. We want them to find a job, and all of these things. And we want them to gain some independence and get out there and not have too much debt. Those are things that we use to measure success for college and how that experience goes well. But we find that when we look at the average statistics out there, it's not amazing. So let's look at some of those statistics right now. So 80% students will change their majors. This can add time, hours, time, money, stress for the students and the family. And we want to make sure that we create a plan so we're doing less major changes during those college years. Only 41% of students will graduate in 4 years. That is a pretty low percentage. Some will graduate in five. Some majors are naturally almost 5 years at this point. Some might take just 4.5 years. Some might take 6, 7 years to finish their degrees. 40% of our students who will start will not graduate. That statistic is always astounding to me as someone who's been in admissions in college, worked in colleges for so long. It's just amazing. We aren't able to hold on and attain every student that starts with us. And usually this is, we want all of your students to get into college and finish and get those degrees. 59%, excuse me, will graduate with loan debt. And in fact, that becomes, as we've been moving forward over the years, that becomes more and more an increase in the percentage. And we also see the loan amounts that are owed growing for families. 27% of students will graduate with a job in their major. That means there's over 70% of students will not get a job related to their major right out of college. And so that is something that even though you might not be thinking about job just yet, that is kind of the bridge that we want to make sure that we're choosing colleges, getting into the colleges that are going to set our students up for success. So those jobs out of college are available, accessible, and your student has the skills and networks to be able to gain those positions. And although some of us might feel we probably are all going to be on different sides of this last one, 57% of young adults 18 to 24 still live at home with their parents. Some of us as parents might think that's amazing, and others of us think we're not that excited. We'd rather you go and find your own place. But you can deal with that. But knowing that almost 60% of students will find their way back home after college, some of that is due to rising costs, some of that's loan debt, but also some of that is just not having a set plan in terms of job, work, finding a position that is giving them the amount of money they need to cover their loans, to cover their rent and their bills, and so forth. And so there's a lot of different things that mitigate that statistic. So I should start with these outcomes because it shows very clearly why students and families need to start planning early and create some strategies around how to handle the application and admissions process. So let's start digging into that. I said, even though I have been in admissions for so long, I'm a parent who recently went through college admissions with my the application process with my own students. But what we see year after year after year is the goalposts, the pathways, the strategies continually have to change. Some of that is due to changes in test requirements, right? 5 years ago, most schools were saying, test blind or test optional, don't even submit a test. And now every year schools are bringing those back. In the past, schools used the same essay prompt for 15 years. This last couple of years, we are seeing schools changing their essay prompts, their supplemental essays, adding more essays every time. When I went to school, when I went to college in my undergrad, back in the day, maybe some of you parents can relate. You took your SAT maybe once or twice. You applied to 4, maybe 3 to 10 schools, and you got in, and you had that was sort of the plan, and you kind of had an idea of where you could go, and you got in, and there wasn't a whole lot of sort of gamification of the application process. In some ways, it feels like it is today. It can feel a little bit overwhelming, like you don't know what's going to get you into a school, right? Because even the best amazing students don't get accepted into all of their preferred schools. And so it's sort of also can add a lot of frustration and confusion. And so one of the things we start with is that we have to have a realistic knowledge of what the admissions process is like and what is it today versus what it was in from our own experience, because it's not that anymore. And then we also have to recognize that admissions is more complex and competitive. It's not just about good grades. It's not just about grades and test scores. It's really creating a story over time about your student, or if you're a student, about you, who you are, and having your experiences, your classes, your leadership positions, what you're doing with your time grow, align with what you want to do for your future. And number two, one of the things that if you that all colleges, almost every college will give you on their website, completely available and visible, but oftentimes people don't know to look, is their factors for admission. You can actually go to most websites on their, they'll be on their admissions financial page, and they will give you a list of 20 factors and criteria about what they use and how they weight it for their application. And every college is different. So to give you some examples, there are academic factors, right? So your unweighted GPA, your weighted GPA, your SAT, ACT score, your class rank, and they'll list those items. And it'll also say very important, important, some maybe, considered, and then not important. And different schools will show you that class rank might be very important. And then you go to another college and class rank is not as important. And so it's not just that you have a high class rank, it's about how that school and college is looking at that class rank when they're deciding how they're going to build their class. The non-academic factors include things like how much research you have, how much volunteer work you have, your extracurricular experiences, leadership. They even have one that's interest in the college itself. Which is something that's a lot of families miss, that colleges are paying attention to who is signing up for their emails, signing up for their campus tours, visiting the campuses, looking at them on social media. Colleges can track a lot of that activity now, and for many colleges that is an important factor. And so again, with non-academic factors, they will list out whether that factor, volunteer work, is it very important for your application? So if you're applying to that school and they say very important, you need to make sure that you spent a lot of time and focus not only doing volunteer work, but expressing what you've done and learned in your application with volunteer work. And every school will have a different factor categorization. So it can be really important. And if we have time today, I can probably bring a few up and show you what these look like. But this is something for you to really be thoughtful about. And you can find these on their website, so you know. And just know that every school will have a little bit different categorization. You also have to develop an academic plan, and this starts early. So many of you are 26, 27. I saw some 29 in there, which is great. You can start this as early as 8th grade, especially now 8th graders going into 9th grade. It's not too early. In fact, my nephew is going into 9th grade in the fall, and he is already starting to work with a college. He's working with us here at HelloCollege to help get him started thinking about college and what that's going to look like, and develop his academic plan, what classes he should be taking in the fall as a first year, as a 9th grader in high school, how that aligns with what he wants to do in the future. So it's really about creating those courses. One of the things that my sister and I were talking about, sort of not, I hadn't really connected with my nephew's counselor about this, but the school advisor had advised that my nephew take AP music because he's amazing in music. And, I was telling my sister, like, although that is great that he is musically inclined, but is he going to be ready for ninth grade? And not only ninth grade curriculum, but the rigor that AP requires. Because what you don't want to do is start off your ninth grade year with a B. Particularly the higher your grades are, the higher your GPA, both weighted and unweighted, the more choices you're going to have in the college application process. Now, some of this you might say, I'm just going to state, they don't care if I have a 3.0, and that could be fine. If you are a sophomore, frosh, eighth grader, we don't know what the admissions criteria are going to be down the road. I always say the higher your grades, the more opportunities you'll have, and you have more choices. And so you don't become limited on where you can apply. And so you want to pay attention to both weighted and unweighted GPAs. Unweighted is where in most schools, in the United States at least, we work off a 4-point system. A plus is a 4, B is a 3, C is a 2, and so forth. And unweighted just means if you got an A in the class, you got a 3.2 or 3.3 or above as a number. A weighted GPA is typically when we're talking about honors AP classes that are given extra credits. And then, so you, instead of a 4 for an A plus, you get a 5. So you get more credits for that grade. But as I was talking about my nephew, we do want him to take as many AP classes as he can, but we also want him to be successful. So it's a real balancing act in terms of figuring out what classes you're going to take, doing it in a way that's not going to overburden the student, but also is going to push and challenge the student to demonstrate that they can take the most challenging classes available and do well. So you want to take those AP and honors classes, but you also want to get A's in those. So you have to balance that. So sometimes it means if you're a sophomore, not taking 8 AP classes, right? You have to kind of lean into those a little slower. Their college classes is also a really great addition to the rigor of your coursework, and that can be really important for planning your classes. The other thing you want to do when you're thinking about academic planning and course selection is making sure that you're taking classes that make sense for your future major, for your future interests, for your passions. You don't just want to take all the classes with no plan. Now, some of us have, there's a little bit of inequity sometimes when it comes to what classes are available. Some of us don't have an AP music class, for example, in our high school. You might not have 20 AP classes. So when you are more limited, you want to try to take more. If there's a lot and you can't take them all, you want to be sure that you're definitely taking the ones no matter what that align with what you want to do. So even if you're 8th and 9th grader, it's not too early to start thinking about colleges that you might be interested in, what type of some majors, and exploring those that you would want to do. We also want to develop a standardized testing plan. So I am recommending, we recommended anybody 2026 and future grad years to have a plan to take either the SAT or the ACT. You need to understand the differences. They both are great. Colleges accept both, either. So you can choose one or the other. Some states like Illinois, for example, are pretty much all doing ACT at this point. Other states have more options available to them. Your school might only do SAT, but you can go get the ACT somewhere else. So that might be part of the decision, is just sort of how easy and accessible it is to get these exams. One of the other things is they're better for different learning styles, different test taking styles. And so they are worth looking into to figuring out which one might be better for your students' learning style and testing style. When you get down to the applications themselves, there is actually a strategy for submitting your test scores or not. How many times do you take your tests? If you didn't feel like the score wasn't as great as you wanted or wasn't perfect, how often do you take those tests? And how are they scored? And if different colleges will score them differently. So you might hear the word super score, which means if you take the SAT 3 times, they'll take the highest score from each section and then add that up as your super score. But some colleges won't. Some colleges will just take your highest overall scored exam. Some schools will say tests are required. You absolutely have to submit your scores. Some will say they're optional, so you can submit them. And so there's strategy about whether or not you should submit those scores based on everything else in your application. And then there's test blind, meaning you can submit it, but we won't really take a look at it. We won't really consider it as a factor. Again, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier about the factors that some colleges will say ACT, SAT, super important, very important. You absolutely should submit and do amazing because it's going to be an important factor. The other thing I want us to talk about, mention is PSAT. Many students will take PSAT. It's not just a great way to practice and give an idea of how you might do on the SAT, but it's also can be very important for the National Merit Scholarship, which can be actually worth a lot of money if you score very high. And you would take the PSAT in your junior year, typically in October, to do that. And because a lot of families will go into the PSAT saying, I'm just going to take it without studying, just go blind, get a baseline, we're good. And the truth is, no, study, take the time, take it very seriously because it can mean money, and it can help you get prepped and even higher SAT scores in the future. So definitely some other strategies around testing and taking the time to be prepped and ready. I see a question in the chat, so I'm going to take a brief pause and answer. Do you recommend submitting SAT, ACT scores to highly selective schools if over 50th percentile and not submitting if less than 50th percentile? Thank you, Stephanie, for this question. In many cases, you're not going to have the choice. You will have to submit the scores. Very few schools are still test optional at this point. And it might depend. I hate to say that, but it's really going to be more about your grade, where your weighted and unweighted GPA is. It's going to also depend on what majors you're applying to. If you're applying to sciences, you're applying to engineering, some of those we would recommend submitting test scores no matter what. Because that's going to be an important indicator for them. And admissions officers at schools will give you some sort of recommendation. So doesn't have to be a guessing game in that case, but it will depend on a few different factors. It's not as simple, this or that. And most competitive schools, highly competitive Ivy League, are looking at tests. The big exception to that are University of California at this point. And
there's a couple other questions on. Did you see that?
Yeah, I'm looking. Yeah, thank you. Next question I'm seeing. Yeah, so Capucine, there are some differences with the length between the SAT and ACT, the length of time that the tests take and what they test on. And so those are some of the biggest differences. So that's also a great question. And I'm not going to go, for the sake of today, I don't want to go too deep into each presentation, but I will say do a pitch. Both College Confidential has some really great forums on the ACT versus SAT, and HelloCollege actually offers an ACT and SAT workshops that we can make available to you as well, for some more deep dive into those exams and which one would make most sense for you. So I want to offer that. But yeah, there's length and sort of subject matter, how they ask the questions and so forth. And then one other question, only 2 out of the 20 colleges that my son is considering are requiring SAT. This is from Sam. And they general recommendation, do not submit unless the SAT, ACT are equal or better than their GPA. So that, I mean, if that's the college's recommendation, that's great. If they're not required, I think that's another piece. Sometimes the SAT, ACT, are really helpful. If they're optional, it can be really helpful if the GPA and GPA is not as good as it needs to be, and the SAT score is better. That can be really helpful. The other piece to that can be helpful is some of those schools that have a test optional can sometimes often still give more money, give some grant money to students with higher SAT scores. So there's some financial piece in there as well.
One quick additional question around that, Jennifer. If you receive accommodations for taking standardized tests, do you have to reveal that on the college application?
You don't. You do not have to reveal your accommodation on the college application beyond the actual requirements. So
okay. We do have some
so
additional questions around. I think it was around some of the AP classes you were talking about and honors classes earlier. Do you want to hold those until we get done, or do you want to address some of those now?
Well, let's go ahead and ask me the question. Why not?
Okay.
People have got
All right.
them.
First question is actually if a person is accepted into a university and then applies for a scholarship and gets accepted, but later wants to transfer to another university, would they lose the scholarship, or could the scholarship be transferred as well?
So if it's a college-based grant that the college has given the student, that will not transfer with you. Now, I will say, again, every college can be a little different. It can be harder to get grant monies as a transfer from the schools. So just keeping that in mind, unless you're community college transfer, there's a different type of process for that. But that school scholarship does not move with you. If you get a private scholarship, that money typically can move with you unless it was somehow tied to that region or that school or something like that. Most scholarships will be very upfront about what their limitations are and restrictions. And when usually they'll have restrictions like you have to continue to keep your grades up, you have to stay at a certain school or a certain major. That might be another parameter. So it might depend on the scholarship. But yeah, the school scholarship would stay with the at the school.
Gotcha. Okay. Here's another one. My student attends a high school with advanced undergraduate and some graduate level math courses. Since admissions officers often aren't math majors and spend so little time reading each application, what's the best way to highlight how advanced his high school curriculum is so they don't hold the lack of dual enrollment courses against the students?
So they won't. So that's a great question. So I always say dual enrollment typically for students is unless your student attends a college prep school where they have basically an articulation agreement with the local community college where the school students are expected to take college courses in their senior year, which there are a few schools that have that kind of set up. Most colleges will look at dual enrollment or college credit as bonuses rather than expected. So they're not going to ding you for not having that. They're going to want to see what you did at your high school. Also, admissions officers are typically familiar with the rigor at various high schools. So they're going to be taking into account the rigor of your high school and program and the rigor of the classes that you took while there. So they will see, and there probably is a pattern of from your school of how people have fared in future college math classes, and admissions officers know that and take that into consideration.
Okay. Yeah, a similar question is that, this individual didn't let 9th and 10th graders take AP classes when they were in those grades. And now that individual took honors classes instead. And now in their junior year, the school's gone back and said 10th graders can now take AP classes. And so the question is, will colleges look at this and say that the course load wasn't rigorous enough?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what typically, again, a lot of admissions officers are fairly familiar with what's going on at different schools. They might not know your particular sense. Most admissions officers are going to start with the overall GPAs, weighted and unweighted. Honors classes are typically weighted the same as AP. So in that case, the honors classes are just as good as the AP. And then that definitely is something you feel like if you feel like it gets into I mean, in terms of the application, it's not going to impact the overall ranking or the overall weighted GPA or unweighted, because the honors and AP are given the same numbers generally. And so then it's something that you might be able, especially if it's, AP Calc, you're a math whiz and you didn't get to take all the AP Calcs because they just weren't accessible to you. That's something that you could put in your essay later on.
Excellent. All right, I think
I'm
we're
gonna
on
keep,
track.
yeah, okay. I'm gonna keep moving. I
Okay,
know there's gonna
yeah.
be more questions. One of the things I will say is that HelloCollege is a organization and resource. So we might not get to everyone's specific question tonight, but we are available and can work with you and your family on these types of questions and concerns. And I also, again, want to go back to College Confidential, has some great forum work and resources as well. One of the things that we know that students oftentimes need to do something outside of academics. So we talk about extracurriculars, do a club, do some volunteer work. But even 10 years ago, it was sort of do 100 hours of volunteer work and you'll be good. Get it, be on student council 1 year and you'll be good. And it's not really enough to have a lot of check boxes anymore. It's not, the quantity of activities is less important as the quality and longevity. So we really are encouraging students to start finding what they love to do and are passionate about and spend time there. So if they are really starting to think about business, go, do a business summer program, do a summer special project, do a research project, start an affiliate program with your parents' permission, of course, but start getting some things, like start a mini business, right? And take a class. I will throw this out. A lot of libraries have a lot of amazing business classes that are free. So check your local library for things like that. But there's also a lot of ones that you can pay for. But you want to start those as early as possible. And yeah, you might be 12 or 13 and your interests change in 2 years, and that's okay. But you're creating a direction and you're continuing to say, oh, I was thinking about business, but when I did that, I started realizing what I was really enjoying. The business part that I really enjoyed was doing the finances of the business. And so now I'm thinking more of finances. That's a story, right? That's a narrative of who I am and where I'm going. And so now I'm applying to this college as a finance major, as a business major, but a focus in accounting because of what I've learned about myself. And they're also going to want to see, so they want to see projects that are unique. They're going to want to see you stretch what's accessible. So summer programs and research, internships, all of those can be really great. They definitely still want to see involvement in your school organizations. That might be sports, that could be arts, it could be the paper, it could be just a social club. You might start a club of something you really like. And then they also want to see leadership. So if you are in Model United Nations, 9th and 10th grade, they want to see that you're taking on more leadership in 11th grade. Same if you're in DECA business program, right? They want to see you doing more focused activities that you're more passionate about. So instead of doing, 100 hours of volunteer work where you just stopped in at the food bank here for 2 hours and then went over to the school book drive for a few hours here over a few years. They want to see, no, I was a regular, I was an intern at the food bank. This is something I really care about. I helped fundraise and bring in this much money. I helped coordinate the clothing drive. They want to see a lot more intentionality around those projects. And help, really what we talk about is the standout factor here at HelloCollege. That's really what we want you to build, is who you are and how, because one of you said it in your questions, that sometimes admissions officers don't spend a whole lot of time on every application. So we need to be able to tell a great story, grab attention, and get admissions officers to want to learn more about who your student is. We're also going to create a really strong college list. This is critical out of all of the things I said, because we have to look at the factors list, but we won't know which colleges to look at if we don't know which colleges we really want to and should be applying to. Many students pick their colleges in these ways. One, my parents went there. Next, my friends are going there. Third, I like their sports team. Fourth, it's nearby, right? It's not too far. That's actually how the reasons most students choose their colleges. And number 5, it's the most competitive I can think of that I will get into. I want to go to Harvard. I want to go to USC. So those are kind of the 5 things people usually look at when they're choosing. But we know from all of our work, HelloColleges have been around since 2012. Many of us have been in the field so much longer than that. What we know about success in college is choosing the right colleges before you even apply. Here at HelloCollege, we have a whole framework we call SAFE, because we want it to be an amazing college list. Our SAFE framework stands for social, academic, financial, and employment. We use these 4 overarching factors to help families build those best college lists for your student and family, right? Harvard, Yale, USC, Stanford, University of Texas, all amazing schools, right? That doesn't mean they're all going to be amazing for you, your student, and your family. And so first we start out by social. We want to look at, does the school have the organizations? Does the school is it a party school? Is it Greek? Is there Greek life and your student wants that? Is it have tailgate parties and your students into that? Is it kind of more of a quiet school, more of a liberal arts? Are the students more artistic and just out there and doing things and being creative? What is the social scene? Is it located in a big city? You're at NYU and your buildings are everywhere in the middle of a city, or are you in the country somewhere where it takes you 30 minutes to drive into a city for anything? What are these pieces that are going to be helpful and help your students succeed in college? Because friend groups, networks, doing things is part of the college experience and all goes in to students' ability to stay into their program. We also want to do look at all the academic factors that make that college a good fit for your student. So we look at academic in two ways. We look at academic in terms of does your student have the GPA, the test scores, the academic background to get into that university? One. And second, does that school have what you want to do academically? Do they have the majors? Do they have the support? Do they have the faculty? And are there large lecture halls, and you love that? You love the idea of being in a huge room of 360 people, 400, 500 people with a professor in the front? Or do you want a seminar style, right? All 4 years. Those are academic questions that we would ask. Financial is really looking at, will this school give me money? Grant money. Can my family afford it? How about commuting? What is that going to take to come back and forth between my home, my family, and my college several times a year? Right? Do we have the finances? And what will I need financially to go to those programs? I also add with finances, staying in state or out of state. That's private versus public. Those become important factors for families. And when we're making that college list, because I have sometimes students will come to us and say, I already have my list. I have my 20 schools, and almost all of them are out of state, and the parents are like, no, I'm not paying for that. I don't know how that's going to happen. And that's not, so then the student has to start all over on their college list. So financial becomes a really important criteria and factor. And then there's employment, right? Does that college do they have the resources, tools, and networks to set you up for your future career? What is their alumni like? How involved are they with the students? Do they have career fairs? What companies are coming onto campus? Are there internships? What opportunities will your student have to help guide them into that career that they want right after college? And so we're also going to look at a balanced list, right? We aren't just going to apply to 5 Ivy Leagues and be done, right? Even if we think we love all 5, those are probably reach. And unfortunately, right now, so competitive, they're super reach, even for amazing students with 4.8s and perfect SAT scores. So we want to make sure we have a balanced list. We want to have some reach schools where we know it's going to be, we don't know if we're going to get in, but you have a chance, but you never know. Ivy Leagues are always kind of in those reach. For example, you have your target schools where you're like, yes, I meet the general range, the requirements. Nothing is ever guaranteed, but I have a good chance. These are the schools. And then we also have sort of that safety list where it's like, pretty much I'm probably going to get into this school. If you have a 4.2 GPA, you've done all this stuff, great SAT score, you probably, go into your state school. Probably your local state school might be a better safety school for you. But there might be a few. So you want to have a few schools in all of these areas. So you have a balanced list as well as one that's a good fit. We want to understand the cost. So sticker price for every college is increasing every year. And some ways that you can reduce costs, we talked about them. There's merit aid. That's the one usually that is given by the colleges. I've called them grants as well, but these are ones based on GPA and test scores. There are private scholarships. There are tons of private scholarships out there. It takes a lot of work to do the research and do all the applications, but sometimes those can be really nice because they can be super specific. So they can be for a student from your small town who's interested in engineering and loves pets. They can be really specific, and so not a lot of people will apply. And then there's other ones where it's like, give us your email and put in a lottery for, $1,000, and those chances are much lower, but easy to apply. And then there's a need-based aid. So we hear, you'll fill out FAFSA. There's federal grant monies for many. There's also student and parent loans as well that can help. I know the loans aren't as great, but some of the others can definitely help. And there are a lot of nuances to how you can develop your student aid index number, which is how the federal government decides your need-based aid. Some colleges will also have need-based scholarships as well. So that's another thing that you can be looking at. And then, if you get that chance for the admissions officer to get to your essay, so they looked at your grades, they looked at your SAT, they looked at your rank, they looked at sort of those top numbers that they do in their first run, and they said, okay, let's take some more time with this application. You have to draw them in with your essays. Most students are going to write one personal essay that they will submit, as well as multiple supplemental supplemental essays. Most colleges today are having not only a personal statement, but 1 to 3 supplemental essays. Certain majors will have additional essays that you'll have to write. An exception is University of California. They don't do any of that. They have, I think, eight questions that they ask and want you to write about. But most schools will require a lot of essay writing. So we start with the personal statement. Again, this is another place where we really highlight your story, your standout factor. Super critical. It's really important that these essays are strong, that they grab attention, that they tell the admissions officer something about you. They're not just a biography. They're not just a regurgitation of your resume. That's a huge mistake we see from families and students. Just kind of going through the motions. I did this and I did that and then I did that. That doesn't really tell them a whole lot. So we want to focus on the essays. So the standout essay has to be important. It has to be a good essay, has to be well written, has to be written by the student, not AI, not your parents. Make sure your youth student is writing it and telling a story about who you are. We also can construct compelling applications. So there's multiple formats, multiple components of every application. You will write an activities list in addition to your resume. And your activities list is actually another place where you can continue building that story, where how you order and describe the activities and different awards that you have received matters and can make a huge difference. And so there's a little bit of strategy about how you develop that. There's also some strategy about how you submit your recommendation letters. Some colleges require them, some don't. Some find them very important as a part of the application and others don't. When we go back to what I was talking about, the different factors. Recommendation letters can be very critical for some colleges, and you have to be thoughtful about who you will get those letters from. Predominantly, you want to have someone who can speak to the student's academic ability, as well as someone who can speak to the student's leadership and potential. Those are the kinds of things you want to hear get letters from. And you do not want to submit more letters. Some people are like, everybody wants to write a letter for me. But what you want to really do is find those 2 people who can really are, again, going to write a really deep, knowledgeable storytelling letter about why you are a unique, amazing candidate for that college. And you're going to manage your timeline. So there's just a lot of work. This is not an easy going. Back in my day, it was like, okay, it's the middle of your junior year. Start thinking about colleges. And then summer of junior year, you're like, okay, I guess I'll apply and just submit before the deadline. It's not that anymore. Unfortunately, we do have to put in some time and energy working on your applications, working on your essays, working on scholarship applications, studying for your SAT and ACT, and your PSAT, keeping your grades up, and doing all your extracurricular work. It takes energy, it takes work, it takes time. And one of the things we see is people underestimating how much time it takes. But then once you have your college list, the next thing we really start doing with students is building the timeline of when they need to apply. For example, and we work so much more in advance to give students that extra time, that even though the Common App doesn't technically open until July 1st, all of our students working with us here at Hello College have already started their personal statements, and they will be done by July 1, if not by August 1. So we have our students, our juniors working, I should say our rising seniors working way in advance, because your applications are going to take so much time. You won't have time later to be building those essays. Right now, for your summer, you can be, if you're a rising junior 2026, you can be working on your PSAT studying, your ACT SAT studying. You can be working, of course, on your classes, but you can also be working on your research projects, your passion projects, your leadership development, and things like that. But when it comes to the application timelines itself, there's actually a lot to decide, and there's strategy to when to apply to which schools, where to apply and when. There's early decision, there's early action, there's regular decision. So some schools will have 2 to 3 deadlines of when to submit the application. Typically, early decision comes with very binding, so you only apply one school early decision. And sometimes there can be some benefits of applying to a school early decision, because there are going to be less candidates for them to look at. At that time, versus regular decision, where that's just all the applications in there. So there's a little bit of that, but it's binding. So if you don't want to go to that school in the end of the day and you got accepted to somewhere else, it's kind of a too bad. You've already given your commitment. So you have to be thoughtful about some of that as well. And we just also want to, like I said, time goes fast. Junior, for you in your those of you in class of 2026, this junior year is super critical. It will fly by, I promise you. So if you have not already started on some of these strategies, please start early, start now. If you're an 8th grader, you can start now, and think every decision matters. The choices that you make today, the decision to blow off studying for the PSAT, or taking the extra time to do the bonus assignments for your AP class, all of that makes a huge difference when it comes down to college applications. So good plans equal great results. And I like to share a little bit. I shared earlier on about some of those stats in general, but I'd love to share some of those stats for us here at Hello College. So 96% of our students have received scholarships. 82% graduate in 4 years with a job in their major, and 90% graduate in 4 years. Some of that success is because they have created a focused plan. They've done a lot of work on best college fit and best major and career fit as well. And so those are some things that we've done to really support students using our strategies that I've shared with you today, with our families. So that's a little bit about us. If you are interested in learning more about us, we are always available at sayhellocollege.com. You're also welcome to schedule a consultation if you're interested, a free 45-minute to talk more about your college needs, how you might need some support, and how Hello College could be a guide. There's no force there. It's just for you as a resource. Then we also have workshops as well available that we can make available to you as interested. So that was a little bit more about Hello College and some strategies, top 10 strategies for a winning admission strategy, winning college admission success. Jeff, I'm going to go back to you to see if we have additional questions.
We do, as a matter of fact. We have several great questions that we want to follow up on. First one was, how do admissions officers view the many pay-to-play programs that offer research and/or internships as an extracurricular activity?
I think they're not looking at them negatively. Typically, most students are paying to do research. It's very rare that a high school student is going to get a job in a lab. and get the research experience they need that is not one of those pay to play type programs. Very rare. I mean, it's just, there's so many things that go into that. And so those programs can be really nice because they are pre-structured, and you're really paying for that mentor's time, right? You're not necessarily, the student has to do the work. So you kind of think about it in terms of that way. It goes a little better. But yeah, the school is more interested in the fact that the student did the research project. We definitely highly recommend research projects. Specifically, not everyone has to do research, but specifically STEM majors, bio majors, people thinking about engineering, and also people thinking about MD, doing Bachelor's of Science to MD, BSMD programs. Highly, highly recommend some research projects.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next question. I've read that elite boarding and private school college counselors actively advocate for some of their students with admissions officers, and that some admissions decisions have been changed because of those relationships. Our student's small and relatively young school doesn't have a dedicated college counselor. How much of a disadvantage is this, especially at selective schools?
Yes, so it's technically, I mean, I can't speak for every little thing that happened. It's technically not very, like people ask us if we have relationships with colleges, and I would say it's not an ethical practice that a college would favor certain students because they were working with a consultant. Now, if they were, I also will say sometimes people have worked together and know each other, right? And so sometimes there is just that collegial sharing, for example. So I don't think your students are going to be disadvantaged specifically by that. It's not like every other college counselor has a school in the back of their back pocket. That's typically not. I just think there are sometimes they're at conferences together. There's some collegial knowledge, experiences and relationships that might, I want to believe that is not formalized in any way. Like I go to this, I choose this, I go back to this school and choose everybody to help this person out, for example.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm answering that, if I'm making sense, but basically in general, it's not really, and especially for a bigger college, there's going to be a lot of people on those admissions selection committees. It's not one person.
Yeah.
So even if that counselor knows one person, that might help that application get through, but it's not going to help them get accepted necessarily.
Yep. Next question. As many colleges face budget and funding cuts, is it a disadvantage for the applicant to apply for financial aid? In this example, are a mid-income family and are not Pell Grant eligible and won't meet the institutional priority of being low income.
No, typically schools will make decisions about admissions first, and not look at most admissions officers aren't looking at financial aid need when making the admissions decision. I can't speak for everyone, but typically that's not the way it goes. They're going to be admissions officers are looking to fill their class with the best candidates. That's number one. And then they figure out financial aid later. And in fact, some admissions officers will go to bat for applicants if they really want that student to be, and later they find they got accepted and later they find they don't have the money, they'll try to work with financial aid to find, increase some scholarships where they can.
Yep. Yep. What would you recommend to a student who's going to a 2-year college to start their associate's degree and wanting to stand out more as a junior in college when applying to a 4-year university to continue their degree?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think you should work with your transfer counselor at the community college. Definitely get to know them because they absolutely know those colleges, particularly when there's articulation agreements between the community college and the 4-year, which many community colleges do. And work with them because not all credits transfer easily. So you also want to make sure that you're working with that transfer counselor. One of the things that is I love community college. I think it's a great option for many folks. One of the downsides is often you're not as, I would say, isolated or bubbled as you are in a 4-year. And so sometimes you get sidetracked with jobs and life and other things going on. But you want to just think about it as I'm using this as just my springboard to get into my 4-year. And so staying focused, and I would say use that time, get to know your faculty, start making connections early if they know people at other universities. Like I will say, I mean, I feel like I got accepted on my own merit, but like when I applied for my doctoral program, my faculty from my master's program knew the chair of my department in my doctoral program, and they actually set up introductions for me. And that can go a long way for you, even if it feels like out of like it feels far away, for example, but that makes a huge difference, even at the bachelor's level. So don't for so students that is sometimes hard because you're going to adults and trying to get them, but college is it's a different environment for sure. I would also say continue to work on your focus. So if your career focus is, you know, computer programming, keep building, keep developing, develop some apps while you're in community college, keep those passion projects going in forward motion, so you can demonstrate that, yes, I didn't come to your college right out of high school, but it's because I was doing these other things. Here's what I've done, and here's how I'm even that much more ready to be a student at your school.
Yeah, excellent. The last question, how typically if you're thinking of GPA, those that are on a 100 scale, do you know how that transfers to a 4.0 scale?
Yeah, I kind of do. This is I do, and because I have reviewed so many transcripts, both in the U.S. and Canada. And Canada, they all use like almost all the provinces there, not all of them, but most use the 100 scale. However, I will say that those scales can be a little tricky. So it's not, some districts do it a little different. So I don't want to misspeak here on this call and be like, this number equals this, because it can be a little bit different. Typically what I've seen is A's, or, you know, usually like a 3 point, like a 3 point, let me see, what am I saying? Over 80 is usually around an A-ish. 70 is usually a B-ish. 60 is usually a C. Those are some of the programs. And then again, there's going to be some programs that do a typical 100 score point, 90 to 100, 80 to 89, 70 to 79 as the C, for example. So I would have to look at your district to give you a real specific answer, and would have to get back to you with some more specific information. But yeah, so I guess my answer is I don't know exactly for you, Sophie. I see your question, but because it kind of depends on what district or area you're in.
Yep. Yep. Well, Jennifer, I don't know if you can see all the people thanking you for sharing your wisdom and expertise with us, but I echo that sentiment. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you all for participating and joining the seminar. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to learn this valuable information. If you want to know more about HelloCollege, as Jennifer mentioned, you can go to sayhellocollege.com for more information. Please continue to frequent and participate with College Confidential. And with that, thank you all again and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.